There are nights that begin like any other. A quiet Friday evening. A woman choosing simple clothes after a long week of endless meetings, legal filings, and emails that never stopped. No makeup campaign. No jewelry designed to impress. Just black jeans, a cream sweater, and white trainers kept spotless from where her friends had suggested dinner at a new restaurant. They promised it was fancy, but not too fancy. And so she went, hair left natural, a touch of gloss, nothing more. She was ready for food, laughter, and perhaps a moment of rest. What she walked into instead was history repeating itself. It began with silence, the kind of silence that sits heavy in a room when something is said that should never have been spoken. A young waitress, her smile tight, her voice sharp, looked at a black woman and decided in an instant that she did not belong. She did not ask her name. She did not check her reservation. She looked at her clothes, at her trainers, at her skin, and she judged. I do not serve poor people. The words cut through the evening like a blade. Conversations at the bar faltered. A couple nearby looked up from their plates. The restaurant froze, caught between disbelief and the sting of something far too familiar. This was not just a story about a meal. It was about respect, denied before a word was spoken. It was about the weight of history pressing into the present. Because how many times had African American men and women walked into rooms built on their labor only to be told they did not belong? How many times had dignity been tested, measured not by truth, but by prejudice, wrapped in a uniform smile? And yet, in that moment, she did not shout. She did not argue. She stood still, calm, her silence sharper than any retort. For this woman was Jasmine Crockett. Not simply a guest at a restaurant, but a congresswoman, a voice that carried the weight of generations. In her silence was centuries of struggle, restraint, and the refusal to let anger define her. She had no need to prove herself, not to a stranger who had already decided she was less. The scene might have ended as so many have before, with quiet humiliation, swallowed and forgotten. But fate had other plans. A man was watching, standing near the entrance, his eyes fixed not on the waitress, but on his wife, Christopher Crockett, her husband, dressed in gray jeans and a simple blazer, carrying no sign of wealth except for the quiet authority in his posture. And when he finally stepped forward, the room shifted. He did not need to raise his voice. He did not need to make a scene. He only needed to tell the truth. That he owned the very restaurant where his wife had just been told she did not belong. That truth was not about ownership on paper. It was about reclaiming space. It was about forcing every witness in that room to confront the simple injustice that had unfolded in plain sight. It was about a black woman demeaned in seconds, standing taller without ever moving an inch. And it was about how silence, when wielded with dignity, can be louder than any shout. This story is not only about Jasmine Crockett and Christopher Crockett. It is about all of us who have felt unseen, dismissed, or disrespected because of who we are. It is about every grandmother who remembers being turned away at a counter. It is about every grandfather who worked a lifetime only to be treated as less. It is about every son and daughter who wonders if the world will ever learn. So we must ask, when respect is denied, how do we respond? Do we fight fire with fire? Or do we let dignity carry the day? Do we leave the table? Or do we remind the world that we have always belonged? Stay with us, because this is not just another story. It is the future our ancestors dreamed of. It is the voice of a woman who would not be silenced, and the truth of a people who have endured too long to bow before ignorance. Subscribe. Stand with us. And remember, a black voice, once spoken, should never again be muted. There are nights when the weight of history sits quietly in the corner of the room, waiting for the smallest spark to reveal its shadow. On the night Jasmine Crockett walked into Olive Grove and Vine, she carried more than the weariness of a long week. She carried the memory of generations who had walked into rooms where they were never meant to belong. This was not just an evening of dining. It was a confrontation with the deep, stubborn roots of prejudice that have always been part of American soil. To understand what unfolded, one must first understand the soil itself. From the very beginning, the United States was a nation of contradictions. Its founding documents promised liberty and justice, yet inscribed into its laws was the belief that black lives were worth less than white. 3/5 of a person. That number, written into the Constitution, was more than arithmetic. It was a wound carved into the heart of a people. Though it was erased on paper in time, its shadow lingered. It clung to classrooms, to workplaces, to sidewalks and shop counters, reshaping itself into whispers and barriers, into lowered voices saying, "You do not belong here." Every elder listening to this story will know that feeling. Perhaps you were a child, turned away from a shop, told to look, but not touch. Perhaps you stood in a voting line and felt eyes upon you, measuring, judging. Perhaps you remember the sit-ins, the marches, the bus boycotts, when simply demanding a seat was an act of courage. This is the weight that Jasmine carried into that restaurant, whether she wished to or not. It is the weight that all of us carry, inherited from centuries of being told that dignity was conditional. But Jasmine Crockett was not a stranger to struggle. Born in Dallas, Texas, she walked a path that was never easy. She became a lawyer not because the world opened its doors, but because she forced those doors open. She stood in courtrooms, defending those who had no voice, representing the ones society preferred to forget. Her rise to Congress was not an invitation, it was a victory, hard-won against skepticism. And the constant question posed to women like her, are you enough? Jasmine answered that question not with words alone, but with a career that made clear she was more than enough. She was essential. And yet, dignity is a battlefield that stretches far beyond politics. It lives in the small places at the cashier's counter, at the taxi rank, at the table of a restaurant. It is tested not only in speeches before the House of Representatives, but in whether one is treated as human when stepping through an ordinary door. That Friday evening in Santa Rosa, Jasmine did not come dressed to impress the world. She came dressed for comfort, black jeans, a cream sweater, trainer scrubbed white, her curls free, her face touched only by a sheen of gloss. It was the attire of someone ready for laughter with friends, not for conflict. Her companions, Teresa and Monique, had assured her it is fancy, but not too fancy. Why should she think otherwise? Was not the promise of America that a reservation was enough to grant a seat at the table? But history rarely leaves quietly. It lurks, waiting in the choices of individuals who inherit prejudice, like a family heirloom. That night, history appeared in the form of a young waitress, not more than 25, her hair pulled tight, her smile too brittle to hide disdain. She looked at Jasmine, at the trainers, on her feet, at the shade of her skin, and, in an instant, decided she knew the truth. Not a lawyer, not a congresswoman, not a paying guest, just another black woman to be dismissed. Her words were sharp, delivered without hesitation. I do not serve poor people. The room shifted. The bar quieted. Forks paused midair. Conversations fell away. For a moment, everyone heard the echo of something much larger than a personal insult. They heard centuries of judgment condensed into a single sentence, and though many looked on in silence, those who have lived this story before recognized it instantly. It was the same dismissal faced by mothers in grocery stores, by fathers seeking work, by children told to stay in their place. In that instant, Olive Grove and Vine became a mirror reflecting America back to itself. Yet, Jasmine did not flinch. She did not raise her voice or demand recognition. Her silence was deliberate, measured, sharp as a blade, for she understood that sometimes silence speaks louder than protest. It unsettles. It forces the aggressor to hear their own words, unchallenged, echoing back with all their ugliness exposed. That silence carried the weight of those who had endured worse and still endured. It carried the weight of ancestors who had faced dogs and hoses, jails and chains, yet refused to bend. This was not the first time dignity had been tested, nor would it be the last. But in that silence lay the possibility of something new, because this time Jasmine did not stand alone. This time, her husband Christopher was near, watching from the doorway. He saw not just a waitress making a cruel remark. He saw history attempting to repeat itself, and he knew, as Jasmine knew, that the answer would not come through rage, but through truth. Before Christopher stepped forward, however, the scene remained suspended, an entire restaurant holding its breath. Some saw only a personal conflict, but for those who knew, it was far more. It was Selma, in miniature. It was a reminder that the question of belonging has never been fully settled, and it was proved that even in 2025, prejudice walks easily into rooms dressed as professionalism. Chapter 1. Of this story does not close with resolution. It closes with a question. How many times must a people prove that they belong? How many times must respect be begged, borrowed, or fought for in places where it should already be given? This is the soil into which Jasmine's story that night was planted. Soil thick with memory, watered by tears, fertilized by resilience. From that soil, the evening would grow into something far larger than a denied meal. It would grow into a revelation, a reminder to all who watched that history is never truly past. It walks beside us, waiting for its name to be called, waiting for someone to answer with dignity instead of despair. The evening began with lightness. Teresa had sent a message earlier in the week, suggesting dinner at a new restaurant called Olive Grove and Vine in Santa Rosa. Monique had chimed in with excitement. They wanted laughter, good food, and a chance to see Jasmine outside of her endless duties. For Jasmine, it was a welcome pause after days spent in hearings, drafting briefs, and answering emails that multiplied faster than they could be cleared. She had not planned to impress anyone. She only wanted to breathe. The drive itself was quiet. Jasmine let the hum of the road steady her thoughts. When she stepped out of the car, she felt no need to adjust her clothes. Her outfit was simple: black jeans, a soft cream sweater, spotless white trainers. Her curls framed her face. Her lips bore only a gloss of shine. She looked comfortable, authentic, herself. Teresa wore boots. Monique had chosen flats, both neat but unpretentious. They laughed as they approached the entrance. Three women who had carried the weight of long weeks and were ready for a moment to put it down. The restaurant itself was polished, the kind of place meant to look refined without becoming unapproachable. Sleek tables under warm light. A bar where soft conversation flowed. A family seated in the corner booth. Couples scattered near the windows. It was the type of establishment that tried to balance elegance with accessibility. For Jasmine, there was no reason to feel out of place. She had dined in halls of power and in corner cafes. She belonged wherever she chose to be. That is the truth of dignity. It is not borrowed from the room. It is carried in the soul. They entered together, stepping towards the hostess stand that stood momentarily empty. They waited, patient, the air around them filled with the clinking of glasses and low murmurs of contented diners. Jasmine glanced at her phone, scrolling through unread messages, letting her friends take the lead in conversation. It should have been nothing more than an ordinary start to an ordinary meal. But footsteps changed the rhythm. From the left came a young waitress, mid-20s, her hair pulled high into a ponytail, her lips painted with gloss, her eyes framed by sharp liner. She carried a small notepad, but did not glance at it. Instead, her gaze fell directly upon Jasmine, scanning her quickly, then moving to Teresa and Monique. Her smile was tight, forced, as though trained to appear pleasant but unwilling to bend into true warmth. "Do you ladies have a reservation?" Her voice was crisp, clipped, almost interrogative. "We do," Teresa replied, calm but firm. Crockett, party of three. The waitress did not bother to check her tablet. She did not even glance at the screen in her hand. Instead, she shifted her posture, tilting her chin as if assessing them. "Well," she said, her tone sharpening, "we have a dress code. No athletic shoes. No hotties." The words hung in the air, heavy with insinuation. Jasmine looked down at her trainers. Plain and clean. Hardly athletic wear. Monique's flats were elegant. Teresa's boots simple. There were no hoodies in sight. Monique answered first, her smile polite but edged with disbelief. "I do not think any of us are in violation." But the waitress was no longer smiling. Her eyes returned to Jasmine, narrowing as though she had found the target of her disapproval. "You sure about that?" she asked, voice firm, lips pressed into a thin line. Then, with a cold finality that stunned even the air around them, she said it. "I do not serve poor people. You need to leave." The world slowed. At the bar, conversation dropped into a hush. A couple in the corner booth glanced over. Forks paused above plates. Even the music playing through hidden speakers seemed to soften. The waitress's words carried farther than she intended, and now others were listening. For a heartbeat, Jasmine remained still. She did not blink, did not shift, did not offer the outrage that others might have expected. Her silence was deliberate. Her eyes lifted slowly, meeting the young woman's without flinch or apology. Her brow rose. A quiet question that needed no words. "Do you hear yourself?" Teresa broke the silence. "Excuse me, what did you just say?" The waitress adjusted her stance, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear, repeating with less hesitation than one might expect. "You heard me. She does not belong here." Monique turned sharply, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Is this a joke?" But Jasmine still did not speak. She let the silence expand, let the weight of it press down on the room. Her restraint was not weakness. It was control. And though the waitress believed she had the upper hand, those who watched began to sense otherwise. Injustice often reveals itself not in grand trials, but in ordinary moments, at doorways and tables. In the eyes of those who believe they can decide who belongs. That evening at Olive Grove and Vine, a single sentence exposed the fragile mask of civility. It showed how quickly prejudice leaps to the surface, how easily it disguises itself as policy, how swiftly it decides worth without evidence. For Jasmine, this was not unfamiliar. She had faced sharper insults in courtrooms, more veiled slights in the halls of Congress. But here, in this restaurant, the sting was not lessened. It was not about wealth or status. It was about the simple denial of respect that every human being deserves. And so, Chapter 2 begins not with food served, nor with wine poured, but with silence stretched across the room. A silence that forced strangers at nearby tables to shift uncomfortably to reckon with what they had just witnessed. A silence that held within it the memory of generations who had been told to leave, who had been made to feel small, who had been denied their place. That silence was Jasmine's weapon. Though she carried it without threat, she knew that sometimes the greatest power lies in what is not said. And in that moment, she allowed the waitress's words to linger, to echo, to condemn themselves without the need of her defense. The room was still, as though every glass, every fork, every quiet breath had paused to hear what would happen next. Jasmine Crockett remained silent. Her eyes, steady and unflinching, met the young waitress's stare. It was not a silence of defeat. It was the silence of a woman who had learned, through years in courtrooms and in Congress, that sometimes silence unsettles more than noise. Teresa, unable to contain her shock, leaned forward. "Excuse me, what did you just say to her?" Her voice was sharp, breaking through the tension like glass splintering. The waitress folded her arms across her chest. Her chin lifted with a defiance she had not earned. "You heard me," she repeated. "She does not belong here." Monique's laughter was bitter, a sharp sound that cut through the frozen air. "Belong? This is a restaurant in a strip mall, not a country club. Who are you to decide who belongs? But the waitress held her ground, her tone sharpening. I do not serve poor people. That is our policy. The lie of those words hung heavy. There was no such policy. Everyone in the room knew it. And yet, there it was, a shield for her prejudice, wrapped in the authority of a uniform. At the tables nearby, whispers began. A man at the bar murmured something to his wife. A younger couple stopped eating, their eyes darting between Jasmine and the waitress. The atmosphere was shifting, the air heavy with disapproval. The waitress felt it too. Though she tried to mask her unease with a posture of control, Jasmine still had not spoken. Her silence was a storm gathering, pressing down on the young woman before her. It was a silence that said, "Your words have already condemned you. I need say nothing more." And then, from the entrance, a quiet voice broke the standoff. "Everything all right here?" Heads turned. Christopher Crockett had arrived, unnoticed until now. He had stayed back, taking a phone call in the car, and had walked in just in time to witness the exchange. He was not dressed to impress. Gray jeans, a dark blazer, a simple watch on his wrist. There was nothing ostentatious about him. Yet his presence filled the room with an authority that was impossible to ignore. He stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Jasmine's back, his eyes never leaving hers. The waitress, for the first time, smiled. She assumed he was a manager or perhaps another customer who might side with her. She had no idea who he truly was. Jasmine finally spoke, her voice soft but carrying. I was just being told I do not belong." Christopher's eyes did not waver. "Is that so?" he asked. Calm, steady, the kind of calm that unsettles more than anger. Teresa interjected, unwilling to let the moment slip away. She told Jasmine, and I quote, "I do not serve poor people. You need to leave." Those were her exact words. The waitress faltered for the first time, her face paling. I was just explaining our policies," she stammered. "We try to keep a certain atmosphere here." Atmosphere. Monique snapped. "Lady, this is not the Ritz. It is a restaurant next to a dry cleaner." Laughter rippled quietly across the room. Not cruel, but incredulous. The spell of silence had broken, and now the weight of the waitress's arrogance was pressing back upon her. Christopher's voice remained even, yet firm. She was here on time. She had a reservation. She was dressed appropriately. Tell me what part of that made her unworthy of service. The waitress shifted her weight, flüsterte, her eyes flicking again to Jasmine's trainers, as though they alone justified her behavior. "And she just does not look like the kind of people we usually get in here," she muttered. Jasmine tilted her head, her arms folded lightly in front of her. Her voice was calm, but each word landed like a stone. "You mean the kind who do not scream money when they walk in? Or the kind who do not need to?" From the bar came a quiet murmur. "Exactly." Others nodded. Subtle gestures of agreement. The waitress bristled. "I am just doing my job. You are making a big deal out of nothing." Teresa's reply was sharp. "No, you made it a big deal the moment you opened your mouth." The confrontation had grown too large to ignore. From the back emerged an older man, his hair streaked with gray, his presence calm but alert. His name tag read Edgar. He was the manager. "Is there an issue here?" he asked, his voice steady but cautious. Christopher turned to him, his expression measured. "Yes, we are trying to figure out if this place has a problem with class or just a problem with manners." The waitress rushed to defend herself. "They are twisting what I said. I was just explaining the dress code." But Edgar's eyes narrowed. "Our policy does not include turning away guests who arrive on time, dressed appropriately." And holding a reservation, he turned to Jasmine. "I am sorry, truly." Before Jasmine could respond, Christopher extended his hand. "Christopher Crockett." Edgar shook it, instinctively polite. Christopher continued, his tone still calm, but his words carrying the weight of revelation. "I finalized the acquisition papers for this location 3 weeks ago. I have been working with the former owner for months." The silence that followed was thunderous. Edgar froze, the reality dawning upon him. The waitress's face drained of color, her earlier bravado collapsing under the truth. You are the new investor, Edgar stammered. Christopher did not gloat. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked at the young woman and then back at the manager. Yes, and my wife is the one who was told she did not belong. The weight of those words was unbearable. The waitress opened her mouth, but no explanation could survive the truth. Her prejudice had not just insulted a guest, it had insulted the owner's wife. The restaurant seemed to exhale, every witness recognizing that the power in the room had shifted completely. Jasmine, still calm, spoke once more, her voice like carved stone. The one who does not belong is her. The moment lingered, heavy, final, and though the confrontation had only just begun, everyone present knew they had witnessed something that could not be undone. The silence that followed Christopher's revelation was suffocating. Every sound in the restaurant seemed to shrink away, as though the building itself was holding its breath. The young waitress, who only moments ago stood tall with false confidence, was now pale, her lips trembling. She stammered, I did not know, but ignorance was no defense. Not here, not now. Jasmine's voice cut through the stillness. Calm but edged with steel, she said, you did not need to know who he was. You only needed to treat people like human beings. The words dropped heavy into the air, undeniable and final around them. Diners shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the truth in her statement. Christopher turned his attention to Edgar, the manager. His expression was calm, but his tone allowed no evasion. I would like to speak with you and the head chef in your office. My wife and her friends will wait here. Make sure their table is ready. Edgar nodded quickly, eager to comply. Relief flickered in his eyes. This confrontation could have been loud, chaotic, even destructive, but instead, it carried a precision sharper than anger. A booth was swiftly prepared with clean linens, silverware, and glasses of water. Jasmine, Teresa, and Monique were guided to it, and the weight of every gaze in the restaurant followed them. In the small office at the back, Edgar sat nervously, while Christopher remained composed. Beside Edgar stood Yamari, the head chef, tall and strong, still wearing sleeves, dusted with flour. The muffled clatter of the kitchen drifted into the room. Yamari spoke first. Sorry you had to walk into that, he said, his voice steady and sincere. Christopher shook his head. This is not about me. It is about the kind of energy you want this place to have. Edgar shifted, his shoulders slumping. We train our staff, he said, but not everyone listens. Some carry their own prejudices. Christopher leaned back, his gaze steady. She did not just break a rule. She showed who she is when she thought no one was watching. That is the real problem. The room went quiet. Jamari finally broke the silence, his voice firmer. Now, she can go tonight. Christopher met his eyes. Not for me, not because she embarrassed my wife, but because she showed every customer here that her respect is conditional. If you keep her, you send the wrong message. Edgar exhaled slowly, nodding. I will handle it. At the booth, Jasmine stirred her water, her voice low and contemplative. She saw my skin, she saw my shoes, and she decided who I was. Monique shook her head in disbelief. She did not even hesitate, like she had said it before. Teresa added, and how many people let it happen every day? How many walk away feeling they do not belong? Jasmine smiled faintly, but it was a tired smile, carrying the weight of too many similar encounters. I have spent years earning rooms like this, but I should not have to earn basic decency. Her words lingered in the air, a truth everyone at the table could feel. Meanwhile, Edgar approached the waitress. Other servers hovered nearby, whispering, their faces tense with anticipation. I need to speak with you in the office, he said simply. For a moment it looked like she might argue, but his firm gaze silenced her. In the office, Edgar's voice was measured. This is not about ownership. This is about the way you spoke to a guest. That does not happen here. Not once. Not ever. She scrambled for excuses, bad tips, scams, people wasting tables. But Christopher stopped her, his tone unyielding. That would never justify what you said. Not ever. Her defenses collapsed. The truth was plain. She had no ground left to stand upon. Back on the floor, plates of food arrived at Jasmine's booth. Halibut, duck confit, and pasta primavera. The dishes looked exquisite, yet the atmosphere remained heavy. Monique chewed slowly, her brow furrowed. It still feels wrong, like it should not have happened so quickly, so automatically. Jasmine nodded. That is the part that stings. It was not personal to her. It was instinct. Teresa sipped her water, her eyes distant. And how many others experience it, then walk away, carrying the weight of it? The question hung unanswered, but all three women knew the truth. Christopher returned, calm on the surface though. Jasmine could see the storm beneath. She is gone, he said. What did she say? Monique asked. Not much. Christopher replied, but she will have time to think about it. Around the room, diners looked up, offering subtle nods of respect. No applause, no words, but recognition was clear. They had witnessed a truth too heavy to ignore. Christopher lifted his glass and tapped it gently against Jasmine's. Maybe it is time we show people. We do not need to yell to be heard. Jasmine's eyes softened as she raised her glass. The booth fell quiet again, not in sorrow, but reflection. Respect should have been the baseline, yet still in too many places. It was treated as a prize. The evening had reached its climax. A storm had passed not through shouting, but through dignity. A young woman had wielded prejudice like authority, and in silence, she had been undone. Now, as she walked out of the building, the question remained, heavy and unresolved. Can one night, one confrontation, truly change a culture, or will it fade into memory? Another lesson ignored. The clatter of pans, the hiss of butter on steel, the rhythm of knives striking cutting boards, all of it slowed as Jasmine stepped quietly into the kitchen. The door swung closed behind her, muting the hum of the dining room. For a moment, no one turned. The kitchen was its own world, a place where flames, sweat, and precision reigned. Then Jamari, the head chef, noticed her, his tall frame straightened, flour still dusting his sleeves. You good? He asked, voice low but attentive. Jasmine nodded. I am, but I need a moment with your crew. Jamari did not question her. He raised his hand and let out one sharp whistle, slowly, like gears grinding to a halt. The room began to quiet. Someone turned down a burner. A young line cook stepped back from the fryer. Even the dishwasher peeked his head from behind a stack of plates. The kitchen, normally so alive with chaos, became still. Jasmine took a breath. She did not want to make a speech. She did not want a spotlight. She only wanted to speak truth. I know most of you did not see what happened out front tonight. She began, her voice calm but carrying, but you need to hear it from me. Heads turned, eyes lifted. She was not a stranger. She was the wife of the new owner. But in that moment, she carried no title. She spoke simply as a woman who had been wronged. A server looked at me tonight and decided I did not belong here. She did not ask my name. She did not check the reservation. She saw my skin, my clothes, my face, and decided she already knew my story. No one moved. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed quieter. Jasmine's eyes swept the room. I was told I did not belong before I was even given a chance to sit down. I was told, in front of everyone, that I did not deserve to be served. That is not just poor service. That is cruelty. That is prejudice, dressed up as authority. Her words landed like heavy stones, each one hitting the ground and staying there. A young sous chef, barely in his 20s, shifted uncomfortably. I have worked in places where that kind of thing happened all the time, he said softly. Nobody ever said anything. Jasmine's gaze rested on him. Then it is time we stop staying quiet. Silence only protects the wrong people. Jamari nodded slowly, his arms crossed, his face thoughtful. You got that right. In the back, an older prep cook, his hands still stained with parsley, spoke up. You handled it better than most would have. Some folks come in here acting like royalty and still get treated better than you did. Jasmine offered him a faint smile, but her eyes carried a tiredness deeper than words. That is why it stings. But it is also why I came back here, because I know most of you would not have treated me that way. What happens out front reflects on everybody, but what you do here matters just as much. She let the silence stretch, not the awkward silence of fear, but the kind that lets truth take root. Then she added, some people think respect is something you earn. I disagree. Respect is something you give right away. If someone proves they do not deserve it, then you can pull it back, but never the other way around. The sentence carried a finality that made even the youngest cook stand straighter. It was not a lecture. It was a reminder of something older, something truer than any policy manual. A quiet murmur moved through the room. One of the dishwashers, a young woman with weary eyes, spoke almost to herself. Nobody ever says it that plain. Jasmine turned towards her. It is not complicated. We all know what it feels like to be judged before we even open our mouths, to be told we are less. That is why it matters how you greet someone, how you look at them, how you speak their name, because you never know what they are carrying when they walk in. Jamari stepped closer, his deep voice filling the room. Respect, Miss Crockett, not because your name is on the paperwork, but because of how you came in here tonight. His words carried the weight of a man who had spent years in kitchens where voices were often raised, tempers often short. But he recognized something different in Jasmine: restraint, dignity, a strength that did not need to shout. Jasmine inclined her head, accepting the respect, but not seeking it. Thank you. But what matters now is not how you treat me. It is how you treat the next woman who walks through that door. The one who looks like me, dressed down, wears her hair natural. Do not wait to see her wallet before you decide she belongs. Decide she belongs because she is human. Her words lingered, and for a long moment no one spoke. The kitchen, usually filled with the racket of clanging pans, now felt like a chapel. Even the steam rising from the pots seemed to hold still. Listening, Jasmine exhaled, not in relief, but in the way one does when a burden is shared. What you do back here, she added, matters as much as what happens out there. You feed people. You nourish them. That is dignity. Never let anyone take that from you or deny it to someone else. For a moment, there was only quiet. Then the older prep cook gave a small nod. You are right. Respect first. Everything else after. Jamari stepped toward the door with her, his voice low but resolute. We will carry it forward. That is what real kitchens do. Everyone eats the same. Jasmine gave him a small, tired smile. That is all I wanted to hear. When she pushed back through the swinging door into the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted. Diners who had been witnesses to the earlier storm now looked up, not with curiosity, but with recognition, even with quiet respect. There was no applause, no performance, just small nods, gentle acknowledgments that something real had just been spoken. Jasmine returned to her table, and as she sat, Christopher leaned closer, searching her face. All good, he asked softly. Jasmine nodded. They listened. That is all I wanted. But even as she said it, she knew the weight of her words would linger in that kitchen long after the plates were washed and the lights switched off. Real change does not begin with policies or punishments. It begins with people deciding in the quiet moments when no one is watching to be better. The morning sun rose slowly over Santa Rosa, casting long golden streaks across the quiet streets. But inside Olive Grove and Vine, the restaurant carried no warmth. Its doors were closed to the public, yet every staff member had been summoned. No clinking of glasses, no jazz humming in the background, no aroma of bread baking. Instead, the room held only silence and expectation. Waiters, boosters, and line cooks stood together in the dining area, some with crossed arms, some with nervous glances at the floor. They knew why they were there. Last night had exposed something ugly, and it could not be buried. At the front stood Edgar, the manager, holding a folder he had not yet opened. He looked more anxious than authoritative. To his right was Christopher Crockett, the new investor, calm and unwavering, his presence enough to settle the restless air, and beside him stood Jasmine. She had not planned to return, but she knew absence would leave too much room for excuses. Change required her presence, so she had come. Her voice, when she began, was steady. I am not here to humiliate anyone. I am not here to retell what you already know. I am here to say why it matters. Last night, I was looked at, judged, and dismissed before a word left my mouth. That decision was not only about me, it was about every person who has ever walked into this restaurant and been measured before being treated as a guest. Heads shifted, a few staff looked away, some pressed lips tight in unease. Christopher stepped forward. When I invested in this place, I believed in what it could be, a restaurant that welcomed everyone. Families, couples, travelers, students, retirees. But none of that matters if the people standing here do not live by the same belief. Culture is not written in contracts. It lives in how you behave every single day. Jasmine's eyes moved slowly across the staff. Respect has to be the baseline, not the prize for looking wealthy, not the bonus for fitting an image of belonging. The baseline, that is how you build a place people come back to. Not just for the food, but for the dignity they feel. While here, a young server raised her hand hesitantly. What if we get it wrong without realizing? Not like last night, but unconsciously, we are human. What happens then? Jasmine softened. Then you own it. You apologize, you listen. When someone calls it out, no one asks for perfection, only honesty and effort. The girl nodded slowly, her shoulders loosening as if a weight had shifted. Christopher added, and if you see a colleague treating a guest unfairly, do not wait for management. Step in, speak up. Culture is not built from the top down. It is built from the middle out by you, every day, in small choices. The words struck with quiet force. For a while, silence filled the room, but it was no longer the silence of guilt. It was the silence of recognition. Jasmine's voice rose again, calm but unshakable. We do not expect plaques with our names on your walls. That is not the point. What matters is that the next woman who looks like me, with natural hair and plain clothes, is welcomed with respect. Not because she might be important, but because she is a person. Respect should never depend on assumption. Jamari, the head chef, nodded firmly from the back. His gesture spoke for those who had not yet found words. Then an older server cleared his throat. His voice was graveled but steady. She is right. We have seen it before. Guests sized up and dismissed. That ends here. His admission carried more than a policy. Jasmine stepped back, her part spoken. Christopher's gaze swept the room. We will be watching, yes, but more importantly, you will be watching each other. That is how this holds. Edgar finally found his voice. This morning is not about punishment. It is about a new start. If you cannot live by what has been spoken, this is not the place for you. If you can, prove it every shift, every guest, every day. The silence that followed was lighter. It was no longer shame, but resolve beginning to take root. Jasmine and Christopher turned towards the exit. Edgar called softly, Mrs. Crockett. She paused. I hope this place becomes what you pictured when you bought in. Jasmine studied him briefly, then replied, that depends on what happens after we leave. Outside, the sun had risen higher, spilling light across the pavement. Jasmine drew a long breath, the tension of last night still clinging but softened by the morning. Do you think anything really changes? She asked quietly. Christopher reached for her hand. It already has. Someone in there will think twice. Next time. That is how change begins. Jasmine nodded, cautious but hopeful. Real change does not roar. It arrives like dawn, slow but unstoppable. Inside, the staff lingered. Jamari finally broke the stillness. He lifted his notepad and said simply, "All right, let us go. Make it a better day." And with that, the work began not with applause, not with spectacle, but with an ordinary decision to do better when no one was watching. That evening at Olive Grove and Vine did not end with applause, with headlines, or with a performance of triumph. It ended quietly, in the subtle shift of a room that had witnessed something profound. Jasmine Crockett and Christopher Crockett left the restaurant not as victors of a battle, but as witnesses to the first ripples of change in a space that had long tolerated small acts of cruelty and prejudice. What had seemed like a simple dinner had become a lesson in dignity, accountability, and the power of presence. Every action that night, from Jasmine's deliberate silence to Christopher's calm authority, spoke louder than any confrontation, louder than any raised voice could have. The lesson was clear. The respect is not something to be earned by appearances, by wealth, or by status. It is the foundation upon which any community, any workplace, any space worth inhabiting must be built. Jasmine's words to the kitchen staff, to Edgar, to Jamari, and to the young servers were not merely guidance. They were a reminder of a principle often overlooked. One does not need authority, titles, or public recognition to choose respect over judgment. One does not need applause to make a statement that changes hearts and minds. The quiet, deliberate choice to act with humanity is often more powerful than the loudest protest. Throughout the night and into the morning, the staff at Olive Grove and Vine confronted truths they may not have fully acknowledged before. They saw that prejudice can manifest in subtle ways, in assumptions made before a word is spoken, in judgments passed without evidence. They realized that their behavior directly influenced not only the guest experience, but the culture and integrity of the place they worked. The clarity of Jasmine and Christopher's message left no room for excuses. Accountability is immediate, personal, and ongoing. Every action, every interaction carries weight. This story extends beyond the walls of a single restaurant. It reflects the everyday reality of millions who face prejudice, whether overt or subtle, in spaces designed to feel welcoming. It mirrors a history that African American communities have known for generations: the cautious walk into rooms, the measured speech, the constant awareness of how one is perceived. Yet, it also offers a blueprint for change. Dignity is a choice that can be made in real time, and leadership is not only exercised from positions of power, but also through simple, unwavering commitment to fairness and humanity. As Jasmine and Christopher departed into the sunlight, the restaurant remained behind them, transformed not by policy alone, but by the people who now carried a renewed understanding of what it meant to be respectful. Diners who had observed the events, who had been silent witnesses, now viewed the staff differently, subtly acknowledging that a lesson had been delivered without spectacle. The lesson lingered. Real change is neither loud nor immediate. It takes patience, observation, and the courage to speak and act when it matters most for the audience, especially those who have lived through decades of struggle. The story resonates beyond a single incident. It reminds us that our actions, whether in public, in the workplace, or in ordinary daily interactions, define the culture of our communities. The courage to act rightly, to uphold dignity, to intervene when injustice occurs, does not always require a stage, a spotlight, or recognition. It requires awareness, resolve, and the understanding that how we treat others reflects on the character of all of us. The final note of this story is subtle but enduring. It is a call to reflection and action, a reminder that progress often begins quietly and grows in ways that cannot be measured immediately. Every person who leaves Olive Grove and Vine carrying the memory of Jasmine Crockett's presence has a choice: to perpetuate bias or to challenge it, to act with indifference or with intentional respect. That choice, made consistently, shapes the world. As the sun rose fully, spilling light into the streets of Santa Rosa, one could see that the real victory had occurred, not in confrontation or in power revealed, But in understanding gained, hearts shifted, and the quiet affirmation that dignity must be the starting point, not the reward. Jasmine's departure was not a conclusion. It was a continuation of an ongoing dialogue about justice, respect, and humanity. Every decision to act rightly, even when unseen, carries the potential to ripple outward, shaping spaces, communities, and lives. In the end, the story is a reminder to all who witness it. The most profound changes begin with ordinary choices, choosing respect, accountability, and humanity. In moments that may seem small, often produces a legacy larger than the grandest gestures. Jasmine and Christopher Crockett left Olive Grove and Vine, knowing that their presence, their guidance, and their unwavering commitment had planted seeds of change, and in those seeds lies hope. A hope that extends beyond one restaurant, beyond one evening, into the countless interactions where dignity and fairness can yet prevail.